Palestine. To some, these rolling hills and rocky mountains are a part of the Palestinian occupied territories within Israel. Others call these lands disputed territories, while even others will always see this as Israel. The debate between who owns this land and what it should be called is now entering its 63rd year. It started in 1948 when Israel declared itself a state. For Israel, this was a declaration of independence. For Palestinians, it was the start of the Nakba, the Great Catastrophe. The conflicts that ensued over the land have claimed over 13,000 Palestinian and Israeli lives over the span of 1948 till 1997. Since the beginning of the new millennium, almost 6,000 more people have died. But this isn't an exposé on the brutality that Palestinians and Israelis inflict on each other. Scores of journalists have already reported on the blood, tears, and pain that Palestinians and Israelis have shed in the name of freedom, security, and God. This is a journey to find and to listen to the human voices behind the pages of history and the rhetoric of politicians. It is a journey to find the real Palestine as seen through the everyday lives of everyday Palestinians. Bethlehem, southern West Bank. It's the capital of the Bethlehem Governorate of the Palestinian National Authority. But it was only 17 years ago that the Palestinians were given the reins to lead the administrative side and military side of the town. It was only in 1995 when the Israeli army moved out of the city and handed the control over to the Palestinian National Authority. This is because from 1967 till 1995, the Israeli army had occupied Bethlehem. They defeated the Jordanians in the Six-Day War. Before that, Jordan had controlled Bethlehem since the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. Today, Bethlehem is indeed under the control of Palestinian leadership, but there are stark reminders of just how little Palestinians control. Only 13% of the land falling within the Bethlehem Governorate is actually in the hands of Palestinians. And even though Jerusalem is less than 10 kilometers away, Palestinians must cross Checkpoint 300, an Israeli army checkpoint, if they are to enter the capital. Permissions, hours of waiting in line, security screenings, and fingerprinting are all part of the normal morning beat for many Palestinians. Areas surrounding Bethlehem are also home to large communities of Israeli Jews. The United Nations Resolution 446 clearly states that any building of homes belonging to Palestinians that were captured during the 1967 Six-Day War have no legal validity and are in fact an obstruction to peace. By international law, there are currently 22 illegal settlements and 550,000 settlers in the West Bank. But even with all the modern-day upheavals, battles, political tugs of war, and arguments over land and resources that have been ever present in the West Bank, most people associate the town of Bethlehem with its ancient history. This is because 2,012 years ago, Bethlehem was the biblical birthplace of Christ. And on this chilly Sunday evening in December, thousands of Palestinians have come out into the streets of Beit Sahor, a suburb of Bethlehem, to celebrate the Christmas tree lighting ceremony. Half of the 61,000 Palestinians who live in Bethlehem are Christians. The other half are Muslims. However, the suburbs of Beit Sahur and Beit Jala, which have 13,000 and 12,000 inhabitants respectively, are largely also Christians. Eastern Orthodox Christians make up the largest denomination of the population. Fadi Abu Sada and his family are Palestinian Catholics living in the Beit Sahur municipality. Katie and Fadi have been married for 7 years. Fadi's family is in the olive wood carving business. Fadi followed in his father's footsteps and is now the owner of an olive wood workshop in Beit Sahur. The ancient artisan art of olive wood carving goes all the way back to the 4th century BCE. During the Byzantine rule of Bethlehem, Greek Orthodox monks taught locals how to carve olive wood. Later on, in the 16th and 17th centuries, Beit Sahur and Beit Jala became major industry hubs for wood carving, especially when Italian and French monks added to the local knowledge of the art.
طبعا أول شيء كمسيحي عايش في فلسطين وفي الضفة الغربية بفتخر إني فلسطيني أول شيء. بس طبعا في صعوبات بنعيشها احنا في فلسطين، بس هذا ما بمنعنا انه ندشر بلادنا يعني ونطلع نهاجر. فاحنا متمسكين في فلسطين ومش راح يعني نتركها. يعني ظروفنا صعبة من الناحية الاقتصادية ومن ناحية الضغط النفسي اللي بنواجهه من الاحتلال، رغم انه احنا تحت ظل سلطة فلسطينية، بس انه في الاحتلال بضل ضاغط علينا، ما بنقدر نتحرك براحتنا، ما بنقدر نروح ونيجي، وهاي شغلات اخرى بتساعدناش انه نعيش، بس احنا راح نضل عايشين وثابتين في بلادنا. في وقت ما بتوقعش انه يصير سلام. يعني احنا يعني نرجع للتاريخ، فلسطين عمرها ما وصلت لمرحلة هدوء انه تقدر تعيش، وهذا لفترات معينة مثلا سنة سنتين، اما بس بتعاود تتجدد المشاكل، وهاي شغلة صعبة بالنسبة لنا. كل انسان طموحه يكون انه في سلام وفي محبة، ورغم انه مثلا الاحتلال ضاغط علينا بنتمنى انه يصير حلول جذرية عشان نقدر نعيش مع الشعوب الثانية. يعني مش بس احنا، يعني مزبوط هم محتليننا، بس احنا مش بسهولة نقدر نظلنا في مشاكل عشان نقدر نعيش. فاحنا نتمنى انه يصير في حلول انه نقدر نعيش، بس في نفس الوقت هاي شغلة صعبة عشان رغم كل اللي بيصير يعني، والتنازلات اللي قدموها الفلسطينية للجانب الإسرائيلي، ما كان فيش مبادرة منهم إنهم يحلوا، فالمشاكل يعني بتظل تتجدد نضل في مشاكل. هاي مشكلة احنا بنعاني منها.
Tourists and the tourism industry are essential to the fragile economy of Bethlehem. Over 20% of the working population is employed in the tourism and tourist services sector. Devout pilgrims and curious travelers alike come to these holy sites, especially these days when Christmas time draws near. This year, it is estimated that over 50,000 tourists will come to Bethlehem. While one segment of the Palestinian population has been busy over the past few weeks preparing for Christmas, and in the case of Catholic Palestinians, celebrating Christmas, for the Muslim population of Bethlehem, especially for the refugees, it is just another day in Palestine. According to a 2011 statistics report by the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian Refugees in the Middle East, there are 206,123 registered refugees in the West Bank camps, and another 848,494 more refugees that are registered but not in camps. The total of Palestinian refugees, including refugees in Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, and the Gaza Strip, totals over 6 million. This makes the Palestinian refugee population the largest in the world. There are 19 refugee camps in the West Bank, 3 of which are in the Bethlehem area. This is Dheisheh camp. Established in 1949, the camp was supposed to be a temporary haven for 3,400 Palestinians who fled from Hebron and Jerusalem during the 1948 massive exodus of Palestinians after the creation of the Israeli state. According to the statistics by UNRWA and the Palestinian Central Bureau of Statistics, during the last 6 decades, the population has grown to over 13,000 people. Even though the population has quadrupled since 1949, the amount of space has not changed. It is about 1,000 dunams, or 1 square kilometer. Naji Odeh is one of the many Palestinians who live in Dheisheh. Odeh is one of the main founders of the Phoenix Youth Center in the refugee camp.
أنا من عائلة من قرية اسمها ديربان. هاي القرية اتهجرت عام 1948. هي بمحيط القدس، وهي جزء من 46 قرية تم تهجيرهم عام 48 على يد المخربين الصهاينة إذا جاز التعبير. فبناء المركز بعطي إلى حد ما وجهات أخرى، بفتح أبواب وآفاق للجيل الشاب. يعني بنفهمهم إنه بعلمك سلاح، وبهذا السلاح بتقدر تقاوم مش بس عدوك، أنت بتقاوم الدنيا وبتغير الطبيعة. فانبنى المركز على هذا الأرضية مقاومة للاحتلال، إنه إحنا رفضنا الظلم، رفضنا الاستبداد، رفضنا القمع، رفضنا جرح الإنسان، رفضنا سخط الإنسان، رفضنا معاملة الإنسان كحيوان، رفضنا العبودية، وصرنا نطلع على الحرية. وبالتالي بدينا بالنشاء مركز ثقافي ممكن يحتوي الناس. وبالتالي الإسرائيليين ما تركوا هذا المركز بحاله، إما أجوا عليه وعرض للهدم وللاقتحام 3 مرات، وقمنا بإعادة بنائه. من ثم اكتشفنا إنه أفضل اسم لهذا المركز اللي بده يظل حي لبكرة هو فينيكس، المركز الفينيك اللي بتجدد وبخرج من الرماد، انهدم بيعود بنبنى. نسوي كاوين الكاوة، جبت كاوة انت؟
جبت هي.
طيب اعطيني كاوة، عندي لكمية لاني انا تلكيمتي زي الزفت بتطلع. اي مالك لكمية وانا
بتحبش اللكم
وانا بغليها. ايوه. طب وطي الغاز؟
وطي شوي او تخلص تقريبا.
ثقيلة هيك بتصير علي.
كيف ثقيلة يا زلمة؟ يلا
الحكيني.
هاني لا احكي كون بدور. ونضالنا يعني في المخيم ان احنا عايشين في مخيم، ان احنا لاجئين في وطننا. هذا هو نضال يعني بحد ذاته. فيعني نضالي انا اني انا بتحمل الازعاج، بتحمل انه انا عايش في مكان مش صحي، بتحمل يعني مشاكل الجيران، بتحمل اني انا فوق كل هذا اني انا يعني هاي مش ارضي، هذه ارض استاجرتها الوكاله إلنا اليونايتد نيشن وسكنتنا فيهن. فهذا كمان هو معاناة بحد ذاته، ان احنا مش في ارضنا، وفي نفس الوقت ارضنا بتبعد عننا نص ساعة، واللي بسكنها ناس من اوروبا ومن روسيا او من امريكا، واخذوا اراضينا واحنا اصبحنا لاجئين في اراضينا.
بس كمان اسرائيل دائما تتعظم، بعرف شو بده يسوي، طالع على عيني.
These checkpoints were not always a part of the landscape of Palestine. checkpoints, barriers, and this dubbed the Wall, have all been a part of a large strategic and military move by the government of Israel. Today, there are 23 physical barriers across the Bethlehem area alone. Israel's government has stated time and again that all these barriers separating Palestine and Israel are for security and to prevent suicide bombers from entering Israeli territory. This security barrier was to be built on the 1949 Armistice Green Line. However, as of today, the wall runs deeply into Palestinian territory, effectively annexing more and more Palestinian land into Israel. If completed, the wall will run 650 kilometers. The Israeli military has also made buffer zones within the Palestinian territories, meaning that 100 to 150 meters of land has to be clear in front of the wall. Because of this rule, many Palestinian homes have been bulldozed. But on this side of the wall, Palestinians who live in Jerusalem face different challenges than the ones their countrymen face in Bethlehem and the surrounding West Bank. According to a 2009 statistical report done by the ICBS, the Israeli Central Bureau of Statistics, the total number of Palestinians living in Israel was over 1.5 million. A 2009 study by the Jerusalem Institute for Jewish Studies showed that the Palestinian population of East Jerusalem was 150,000, with a little less than a third of those living in the Old City of Jerusalem. However, in 2008, the Palestinian Central Bureau of Statistics placed the number at 200,000. And even though Israel preaches to be the only democratic nation in the Middle Eastern region, Palestinians who live in Jerusalem are not given the right to vote for either Israeli members of parliament, the Knesset, nor are they allowed to vote for their Palestinian counterparts. The vast majority of the Palestinian residents in Jerusalem are Muslims. Arabi al-Rishik and his family live in the Old City of Jerusalem.
أنا من مواليد القدس من هون، مواليد 2/10/1971. أنا انولدت هون برضه بالقدس في البلدة القديمة، وأبوي برضه انولد برضه في القدس في البلدة القديمة. تقريبا يعني تمركز أهلي تقريبا برضه في القدس وأيضا في البلدة القديمة. إحنا هون كمقدسيين يمكن بديش أقول إحنا كل جزء من فلسطين، سواء في غزة الضفة كل هذه فلسطين، بس القدس لها ميزة خاصة ولها استهداف خاص أيضا من الاحتلال. يمكن الضغط اللي إحنا بنتعرض له المقدسيين هون ولا أي منطقة بكل فلسطين بتعرضوا لها، من سياسة اللي هي هدم البيوت عندنا في القدس، من سياسة التجهيل في المدارس، من سياسة القبضة الحديدية، من سياسة القمع، من سياسة الإقامات الجبرية للشباب، سياسة التجهيل أيضا. فهون كتير بيحاولوا قدر الإمكان إن هم يفرغوا كل المقدسيين من محتواهم الفكري. هلا سألوا مرة إسحاق رابين، كان بتخيل هو وزير الدفاع ب 88، أنت كيف بدك أنت تقدر تقضي عليهم كناس مقدسيين في القدس؟ كيف يبطلوا يحبوا وطنهم؟ كيف تقدر أنت تسيطر عليهم في الدبابات؟ قال لهم لا، قال لهم إحنا بدنا نعمل من 88 لا كمان 20-30 سنة لقدام إحنا نقدر نفرغهم من محتواهم الفكري والنضالي. إذا قدرنا إحنا نفرغهم من هذا الشغلة بنقدر إنه إحنا نسيطر عليهم. فهذا هم عم بيطبقوه هلا بالوقت الحالي.
UN Resolution 446 clearly points out that areas including that of eastern Jerusalem should not be settled by Israelis. They too, like the settlements in the rest of the West Bank, have no legal validity. Recently, the Palestinian president Mahmoud Abbas, or Abu Mazen as he is known to many, went to the United Nations in New York and submitted a bid for full membership to the UN, hoping that this would pressure the world, including the United States, to recognize Palestine as an independent and sovereign state.
Palestinian people in the homeland and in the diaspora, to say after 63 years of suffering of an ongoing tragedy, al-Nakba, enough, enough, enough. It is time for the Palestinian people to gain their freedom and independence. The time has come to end the suffering and the plight of millions of Palestinian refugees in the homeland and the diaspora, to end their displacement and to realize their rights, some of whom were forced to take refuge more than once in different places of the world. At a time when the Arab peoples affirm their quest for democracy in what is called now the Arab Spring, the time has come also for the Palestinian Spring, the time for independence.
It's been 5 months since the Palestinian president submitted his bid to the United Nations.
أمنية حياتي إنها تتحرر فلسطين ويستمتعوا فيها، لأنها فلسطين جميلة وحلوة وبتمنى يعني إن الله يعطيني فعلا طول العمر حتى أنا أشوف فلسطين حرة، ونعزم كل أصحابنا وأصدقائنا اللي في العالم ومناصرين القضية الفلسطينية يجوا عنا على فلسطين الحرة إن شاء الله.